Get my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid. As you can tell, the sun is already down below the horizon. It's almost dark. And I used coming up here to make this video as my excuse to get out of work, or my beautiful bride Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, was going to work me until after dark. The days are getting longer and warmer, and we've been clearing brush, clearing garden space. I said, hey, I got to make a video. I got to go tell a story. She wanted me to keep going. She says, oh, yeah, go. I was like, oh. So here I am. What in the heck story am I going to tell? Well, I'm going to tell you a story that I've thought about telling you off and on for years, but that I never did because I knew you wouldn't believe it. The reason I knew you wouldn't believe it is because I'm not so sure I believe it. This is a story that was relayed to me 10 or 12 years or so ago. We were living in the Philippines. We were down in Mindanao. I'm not going to say exactly where. In a very remote area for the longest time. We didn't have running water. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have, there was one spot in our bed when it would rain, the roof leaked so bad, there was only like one spot about this big in part of the bed that didn't get wet from the leaky roof. So we would put Daniel, our son, who was about that big at the time, in that spot. And then me and Dearly would, lay on opposite sides of him and try to do like a contortionist type thing to avoid the rain. There's a much missed sound, isn't it? The peepers, call them. The frogs down in the pond. Some of them are tree frogs. But here we are, March 1 as of this recording. They've been out for about a week or so now. Been out ever since that guy rode by here on a motorcycle here a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact. So, things started getting just a little bit better for us there back during those days after we'd been out there in the jungle for quite a while. And we were doing well enough from writing and whatnot that I was involved with to actually move out of the jungle and go about 2 hours away to a city, but not like a big enough city to really, it was a welcome, and I'm not a city guy, listen, you know this, look where I live. But being stuck in a jungle for a couple of years, it was neat. When I came out of there, I was very fluent in the native language and understood the culture and ate the foods. And it was a hit the ground running type learning experience, which is really the best learning experiences. If you ask me, that's how you truly learn, is by the experience. I could have learned the language by doing Rosetta Stone or studying the book, but I learned by trial by fire. If I didn't learn it, I wasn't going to have a conversation with anybody other than my wife. I didn't expect them, to learn my language because I showed up, and so I learned theirs. But we got to where we could afford to live somewhere where we could have utilities, running water, electricity. Almost. This is how badly I wanted to kind of get out of that jungle. We were waiting on my next check, my next royalties check from whoever I was making rich when I blogged, getting like a few cents off of the whatever. So we found a house to rent. It was a house in a barangay. It was a nice little barangay. That means neighborhood. And I went to meet with the owner. It's a little different there. Sometimes there's phone numbers. Sometimes it says, if interested in, and it's crazy, guys. I haven't thought about this in years. You might be, this blew my mind the first time I saw this. And I'm not bashing the Philippines culture. I'm just telling you, this is how it's done there. It's slightly different, or a lot different than one of the ways we do it here. One of the things we do here. You might be walking through a neighborhood and here's a sign that says house for sale up in a yard. And you think, well, look, there's a nice house, or maybe house for rent. And you're like, oh, wow, that's a nice house, nice convenient neighborhood. Well, you call the number and that's not the house that's for sale or for rent. 99% of the time, it could be somewhere on the other side of the city or out in the provinces or out in the country. They just stuck the sign there in front of that house. So that'd be like you're driving down the road, going down the street here in the U.S., and you see a beautiful house, and there's a big for sale sign in front, right? Well, that's not how it worked there. So we were fortunate enough to find a house that sign matched the house, but the person that owned the house was all the way on the other side of the city. So we had to go over there and meet with her. Her name was Irene. We called her Miss Irene. We lived there for 2 years, good 2 years, before we then went on to a much larger city. And then eventually from there, we're able to make it to the U.S. Miss Irene was a wonderful woman. She was just a beautiful person. She was a beautiful soul. She was 90 years old. Yeah. And the story I'm going to relay to you tonight comes from her. We met with her, and the rent was $75 a month. $75 a month. Nice house, running water, electricity. The roof didn't leak when it rained. I didn't have $75, and she wanted $150 first and last months, you know. I said, look, I'm broke. I got to get out of that jungle, and I think I've lost my mind living out there. But I've got a check coming. It's 2 weeks. If you let me just move in with my wife and our son, you know, I'll pay interest or whatever. And she just smiled and she said, no, you go ahead. You guys move in. You know, I trust you. And, you know, there'll be no interest. There'll be no added charges because I have to wait on the money. I was like, wow, this is wonderful. She didn't know me. And I was from an entirely different country. I was from a world away, right? So we move in there. And during that 2-year period, you know, I was trying to get established, and then it just wouldn't work out. Trying to get established, making some money. But there were times when times were tough. And I know there were a couple of times I had to go to Miss Irene and say, hey, I'm going to, you know, pay you, but it's going to be late. And she would smile and she'd say, okay, it's fine, whatever. Now, I never missed a month. There were a couple of months that I was late, but I never missed a month. And she would invite us she was really big in her church. She was a Christian. She was Protestant. She wasn't Catholic. The number one religion over there is Catholicism. Where we lived, close number 2 is Islam. But there's a growing number of Protestants down in Mindanao, and she was one of them. She would have these beautiful dinners for her congregation members at her house. She had a nice house. This lady had, I mean, you know, and she would invite us to these dinners, and we would meet wonderful, educated, professional people who treated me with respect and dignity as I did them. She just really was a wonderful person. She had a daughter that was a little bit older than me. She'd had her late in life. She was in her 40s or maybe even 50 when she had her daughter. So anyway, her daughter was the same. I'm watching some geese. The guys, good signs. You hear the frogs. I was telling you, you know, the trees and the bushes and the shrubs are starting to bud out. The geese, the last couple evenings, are flying across in formation heading north. They're going due north from south. So spring is on the way. It's coming. So one time, this was, we were leaving that place where we lived for 2 years, going on to the next city where we would stay for about another year and a half before we would come here to America. And as I was leaving, going to tell this wonderful woman, Miss Irene, goodbye, I made sure to thank her for her kindness. I said, you have been more kind to me than anybody in this country. And that was the truth. And I'd been over there consecutively for like 4 years without having left. And met a lot of wonderful people over there. My wife's family's wonderful. A lot of folks that are not related to her are wonderful people. But this woman, she's one of the most kind people, even here, my life here in my home country. One of the most wonderful, genuinely kind people I've ever met. Remember, anybody can be nice. Nice is often fake. Nice really can often be a cover for underlying passive aggressiveness, gaslighting. I have to tell you later. But kindness it's an action. It's an act. People can fake being nice. Most people do. It's hard to fake actually going out of your way to do something for somebody that you don't need to do, but you know it needs to be. They're kind of in need for that, and you take the initiative to do it just because you know they need the help. That's kindness, and this woman was truly kind. So here's a riddle real quick before I get on with the story. How many narcissists does it take to change a light bulb? 0. They all use gas lighting. Ba-dum-bum-ching. So when I thanked her for her kindness, she thanked me for thanking her. She said I was very welcome, and she said, I've never told you this, but I feel like telling you now. I said, my heart kind of went out to you when I first met you because you remind me of my father. I said, your father? And she goes, yeah. I was like, in what way? I said, your father wasn't an American, was he? And she said, actually, he was half. He was half American. And she said he had green eyes. And it was my eyes. They're hazel, but if I wear green, they really look green. Get my 6. And she said, when you walked in the door, I had a flashback to my last memory of him. She was 4 or 5 years old. She wasn't double digits. She was only like halfway to double digits. 4 or 5 years old. It was the last time she saw her father. And I said, wow. I said, I'm touched and I'm humbled. I feel that statement is complimentary. And she goes, oh, it was. She goes, yeah, I still remember it. He walked into my room and he kneeled down at my bed, or what she was using for a bed. It wasn't actually a bed. And said he had to go and he wouldn't come back, but he loved her. And she never saw him again. And I said, that's terrible. I hate to hear that that's how the relationship with your father ended. And she said, well, I could tell you the full story, but you probably won't believe it because people back then didn't. A lot of folks don't now. And she said, I'm very blessed to have gotten that last goodbye from my father because most folks in similar situations to mine don't. And I said, well, Miss Irene, putting it out there like that, you can't just leave me hanging. I would like to hear the story. And yes, I see that too, and I saw the mist. And I heard the footsteps. Keep getting my 6. For as you know, here where field meets forest, at higher elevations, when the seasons are changing and when you're close to water, like the pond, and when day turns to night and you see the bats flying for the second time this year, but the bats are out now down here in Central Virginia, the veil grows very thin, especially when you start talking about these things. So I mentioned to you that this old lady was quite up there in years. She was actually a little girl when the Japanese Imperial Army invaded the Philippines during World War II. Here's some history for you. Pearl Harbor was the first place that the Japanese bombed, of course. Took us by surprise. The very next day, the second place they bombed was the Bay of Davao. Davao City, to be more specific, because they knew that is where the Americans would use our launching pad to get, to the Philippines, stationed up there and then go into Japan. So Philippines was an ally. They were trying to bomb them, take them out next. Anyway, when the Japanese attacked and when they entered the country on foot, a lot of the families fled to the mountains. And that was the case for Miss Irene and her family. As a little girl, her siblings, everybody in her barangay or neighborhood left where they were and fled to the mountains. And they took a trek, she told me, through a very treacherous region in southern Mindanao that it wasn't just a long distance away, a 3-day hike, but there were cobras, venomous snakes, there were pits of quicksand. It was treacherous terrain. The reason they went that way is because they viewed it as if they would be less likely to be followed by the Japanese, and because it was a shortcut to where they were going, because if you were to take the road around the island to avoid the jungle, it literally took twice as long, even though there was a road, because it wasn't a very good road. So they trekked through there, and Miss Irene's father, as well as the majority of the rest of the men who were not elderly or disabled physically to the degree to where they couldn't fight, told their families, hey, you're safe, we love you, we'll be back, we're going to go fight the Japanese. And they went back from where they fled, just like a lot of the men and women are right now in Ukraine against the Russians. So anyway, she said, Miss Irene said that they were out in the jungle hiding for a couple of months. She was missing her father dearly. She was a daddy's girl, even though she was very young. And she says she remembers one night she had gone to sleep, and in the middle of the night, she could hear footsteps. They woke her up. So she woke up to the sound of footsteps, and she looks over, and through the door comes her father. And she starts to get surprised. She starts to actually scream, but he's saying, shh, 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 quiet. And so she stays quiet, and he kneels down there beside her, and he says, hey, I love you, and I missed you, but I have to go back. I can't stay, and I'm never going to see you again. Just always know I love you, I will miss you, and I will always be with you. And she said she cried. She begged him not to go. He said, and she said he kissed her, he hugged her, and he left. And shortly after that, her mother came into the room because she'd woken her up crying. And she asked her, what's wrong? Assuming she had a bad dream. And she told her, Daddy came to tell me goodbye. He said, I'll never see him again. And then he left. And so her mother, of course, got excited and starts going around looking for this guy. Well, he wasn't there. Well, Miss Irene and her family, they hid out at their secreted location there for a number of years. 3 or 4 years passed before General MacArthur, who had been in the Philippines, left to go down and help liberate Australia, then returned to the Philippines, as he said he would. He said, I shall return. He kept his word. He came back and then routed the Japanese. The war was over. They were able to leave, go back to where they had fled from. They never did hear from her dad again. But she said several years later, somebody from their barangay, somebody in their community came back. They had been out in that deep, thick jungle, hunting, whatever they were doing out there. She wasn't specific with the details, but they'd been out there for some time, and they came back. And they brought some items they'd found beside a pit of quicksand. They found a horse, not a horse, but a donkey's reins, and they found a jacket, and it turns out the jacket had belonged to a lightweight jacket, had belonged to Miss Irene's father. That's a hard story to believe, and she told me I wouldn't believe it. And at the time she told it to me, I did get goosebumps. I got goosebumps a bit here in the retelling of it. Am I still as unbelieving of this story as I was when I first heard it a dozen years or so ago? I didn't entirely not believe it at the time, and I think I don't believe it even less now with some of the things I've seen and experienced around here. Yeah, like those guys standing up there watching and listening to this whole tale. So I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, come back for more tomorrow, because I can assure you, if my beautiful bride dearly, aka Giggly Girl, is working me as hard tomorrow as she was today, I'm going to use coming up here to tell a story as another excuse to get away from the work and to come up here and do it. See you for more then.